Welcome back, everybody. This is Modern Randy. I am Randy, and today we're talking about the standard meta breakdown, or breaking down the standard meta from this past weekend. What happened? What didn't happen? What decks are doing well? What's doing bad? As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, you like what you're doing, what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you guys are playing, what you guys are taking to your RCQs. Love to hear from you. So, starting off with the first challenge on Friday here, 12-6. We can see that we had Dimir Midrange putting up 11 copies. No surprise there. Dimir Midrange and Golgari Midrange has been two of the biggest decks being played. Although Golgari didn't really show up to this one. We had 11 copies of Dimir Midrange. We had 4 Jeskai Convoke, 3 Domain, 2 Girl Prowess, 2 Selesnya Mid, and then a bunch of different one-ofs in there. Some kind of more popular ones, Mono Red, Boros, Caretakers, things like that. And then the Bant and Sultai Tempos are just the Crab Tempo decks, the Simic Tempo decks that we've been seeing. They've been experimenting with going Sultai Black for a little bit more removal. Bant, same thing with a white for Shelter by Ghost, things like that. So nothing too crazy there. But Dimir Midrange was the #1 deck by far with 11 copies in this top 32. Kind of crazy that Golgari only putting up 1 copy. Really, we've been seeing, Dimir being like 11 or 10 copies, and then Golgari being, right around like between 5 and like 8 copies right behind it. It's been like neck and neck. So it's kind of crazy to see Dimir just kind of completely overshadow and just take it out in the sense of, just no one was playing Golgari this time around, or at least for this challenge. So definitely something to see, something to notate, that it seems like Dimir may be pulling away as the premier mid-range deck as a whole. That being said, Dimir Midrange did take down the whole challenge, so nothing too surprising there. Some new cards going on, some new stuff going on here. This one was playing Fey Boom. Oh my gosh, Fey Bloom Trick. I swear I'm not dumb when it comes to talking. So new instant, or one new instant from Foundations. It's 2 and a blue. Create 2 1/1 blue fairy creatures, tokens with flying, and then when you do, tap target creature opponent controls. Notably, that does help trigger with Spell Stutter. Spell Stutter counters a spell unless the player plays 2, and then 1 additional for each fairy that you control. So, Fairy Mastermind, obviously being a fairy, helps trigger that, and then Fey Boom also triggers that. Notably, they're up to 4 Kaidos. It seems like 4 Kaidos has become the new main, or the new thing to do here. Also playing Soulstone Sanctuary, the new man land that you pay 4 mana and it stays a land forever. Kind of a new thing going on there. Seeing play in both the mid-range decks, Golgari and Dimir. So nothing too crazy. That's something new. And Tidebinder is kind of making its way into the main deck instead of being a friend sideboard card. So that's another new thing that they're doing. Another thing to take away from this sideboard. Nothing too crazy in the sideboard as a whole. 2 negates, blot out, because there are some reanimate decks running around. Being able to get rid of those big reanimate targets without actually having to target it. Duress, same thing we've been seeing. Cut downs, annoy it with affliction, more sideboard removal. 2 Children in the sideboard, nothing too crazy there. That card keeps flip-flopping back and forth between being sideboard card, being main deck card. I don't think anyone knows where they want it. They just know they want it somewhere in their 75. That being said, as we go through these challenges, you'll see Dimir is not a stock 75 by any sense of the imagination. These decks keep changing, keep evolving, numbers keep changing around. This one was only playing 2 Mockingbird, for example, and 3 cutdowns in the main, things like that. Playing, 2 of the Fey Boom Trick, something different there. I do like the fact that it's playing 4 Enduring Curiosities. I think that cards are super amazing. If you want to play, Dimir, you want to be playing 4 of those. You want to have that on, on turn 4 every time, essentially. So nothing too surprising here. Biggest thing to take away from this is the trick card, Tysus Tidebinder being in the main, and Kaido seems to be the new norm as 4 of in the main, instead of playing around with like 2 to 3 copies. So definitely some things to look out for. Alright, moving on to Saturday. Saturday was packed full of different challenges and stuff, so we'll kind of try to go through these as fast as we can. Dimir Midrange, once again, putting up 5 copies, no slots there. Golgari Midrange, though, did have 5 copies, so it did show back up, kind of showcase, hey, okay, there's still another mid-range deck in this format. Calm down. Rule Prowess also with those 5 copies. Mono Red with 3. Jeskai Convoke with 2, and then a bunch of different one-ofs. Some kind of interesting ones there. There's a couple of different Reanimator decks. Esper and Rakdos Reanimator putting in numbers. So kind of like I was talking about with those blotouts, not too surprising. We're seeing these Reanimator decks kind of, pop up. The 4-color Tempo deck is just the Simic Tempo deck, now playing 4 colors, so splashing black and white for sideboard cards, answers to, the aggro decks, things like that, things where they struggle with. So nothing too crazy there. That being said, though, what did end up taking down the tournament was the Jeskai Convoke list. Nothing too crazy in this list, pretty stocked list as a whole. I think the biggest thing here is that 4 Shelter by Ghost was in the main. Not too surprising as a whole, though. That being said, with aggro decks still running around rampant and things like that, and plus, Shelter by Ghost essentially hits anything you want it to hit, so just a good tempo swing in and of itself. Out of the sideboard, nothing too crazy. The split ups are the biggest thing that I think were surprising to me, or at least things that I haven't seen. I mean, it makes sense as a whole. If you're dealing with bigger creatures, your opponent's gonna be leaving those out back to block. You can tap out for a Convoke creature, so you're paying no mana for that. Then cast Split Up to destroy all the untapped creatures. Do a pseudo board wipe. Kind of makes sense. I think it's an interesting thought process for the deck. Deck definitely seems still good, still super linear and powerful. We'll see if this deck is still doing well. I think this deck has a good game plan against Dimir a lot, where it gets to go underneath Dimir, which is not something a lot of decks can say. But being able to go underneath Dimir and kind of just have this real good go wide strategy that Dimir doesn't do well against as a whole. So I think that's what this deck really preys upon. So if Dimir does start popping up or continues to pop up as the #1 mid-range deck that we see kind of going forward here, this is probably one of the best decks to take. It has a good matchup against both the aggro versions, or the aggro decks running around, the mono reds, the Gruuls, Boros, things like that, because they're sheltered by Ghosts in the main, plus, the go wide strategy to where they can't really keep up with that situation. And then you also have a good matchup against the premier mid-range deck, so clearly that's where you want to be. Obviously, the biggest problem with the Convoke deck usually is that it can just lose to itself. You draw too many lands, you don't draw your spells in the right order, things like that, and just kind of fall flat because you don't really have any way to generate card advantage besides popping out clues or popping maps. But that still can be a very slow, methodical way of doing it. So plus your mana can just kind of screw you with being 3 colors. So little negatives to this deck as well. It's not just all rainbows and sunshines, but it was able to take down a challenge. It did put up numbers in the last 2 challenges. So definitely a deck that is picking up some steam, I would say, especially if Dimir is going to be the premier mid-range deck to play right now. Moving on, we had the second standard challenge that happened as well on Saturday here with, once again, Dimir mid-range putting up 8 copies, Golgari putting up 6, what we're normally used to, that 8 and 6 number, Jeskai Convoke putting up 5 copies, Caretakers for 4, Domain with 2, and then a smattering of 1-ofs. That Ghoul Druid deck always kind of showcasing on its outer rims, outer fringes play. Nothing too crazy here. Like I said, Dimir and Golgari midrange putting up the most copies, with Jeskai Convoke still putting up 5 copies as well. That being said, Dimir did take down the tournament. Not too surprising as a whole. Like I said, if you look at this list, there are now differences compared to that one we looked at the first time. So now we're seeing 3 Preachers in the main, only 1 Tidebinder, only 3 Curiosities. I think it's a little weird. Still have the 4 Kaidos though, 2 Duresses and 2 Phantom Interference now in the main deck. Last deck we saw didn't play any interferences. It was playing Spellstutter and the Feybloom. So, just the differences there. And then even in the sideboard, we're seeing differences here. Have that, the End is in the sideboard here, Ghost Vacuums being in the sideboard, 2 more Tidebinders in the sideboard, Shieldred's still in the sideboard, so maybe that's just where Shieldred's going to belong for these decks moving forward. I don't know. I'm not a Dimir aficionado. I'm not one who's playing that deck a whole bunch, so I'm not going to sit here and say that's where it belongs or doesn't belong. But kind of interesting, I think, that they're only on 3 Enduring Curiosities, still on the 2 Soulstone Sanctuary, so it kind of looks like that might be here to stay. Obviously, time will tell for that for sure. So it's kind of interesting, different numbers, sideboards being different, things like that. I just think that the 75 for Dimir is not figured out. They just have figured out that it's a very good deck. So be interesting to see what ends up being, quote unquote, the best 60 or the stock 60 that we're going to see moving through the RCQ season. All right, moving on. There was also a standard showcase qualifier on Saturday as well. A bunch of different things going on for standard. So once again, Dimir midrange putting up 10 copies, no surprise there. Gruul Prowess with 3, which is kind of surprising. We haven't really seen a deck kind of pop up at all. Mono Red with 3, Azorius Convoke with 2. That's the blue-white deck that's running around with the Leyline Axe. For some reason, it gets labeled as Convoke. I haven't figured out yet why. It plays 0 Convoke creatures. Golgari midrange only putting up 2 copies. Again, kind of surprising. Golgari midrange has always been that one that was, Dimir midrange, Golgari midrange was right next to it. And now 2 different times we've seen it now only put up, a paltry 2 or 1 copies compared to Dimir putting up double digits. So Caretaker's Talent also putting up 2, Domain putting up 2, the Rug Flood Color deck putting up 2, and then a spattering of 1-0s, notably Jeskai Convoke being only 1 copy this time instead of 4 or 5 copies that we've seen in the last couple qualifier or couple challenges, sorry, not qualifiers. So not too surprising there. Same numbers that we're expecting. Dimir mid-range is just, taking up a bulk of these, top 32s, and it's not too surprising. It's basically one of the best mid-range decks. I really thought Golgari mid-range was going to be able to pull out, but it seems the more and more people are playing, the more and more things are changing. Dimir is just winning out over Golgari, so good to know moving forward. And then, of course, Dimir did also win this as well. But, notably, we have big changes here as well. Only 2 go for the throat this time with 2 Shielded Edict. Still playing the Phantom Interference in this one. We have only 3 Curiosities yet again. We have Cryptomancer being played that hasn't been seen played in any of the other lists. 2 of the Tidebinders, though, still here. Notably, no 1 Shielded in the sideboard. Sorry. They're down there at the bottom, but only 1 Shielded in the sideboard this time. So it's kind of like these different numbers still working around the whole playset of creatures in the sideboard. So just kind of interesting to see what people are thinking, what people are doing. I still think that if you want to be playing these decks, 4 Enduring Curiosity is where I would be. Like, basically starting out with this deck, I would probably have 4 Sirens, 4 Masterminds, 4 Floodplain Drowners, 4 Enduring Curiosities, and I guess 4 Kaidos, because apparently it's what everyone's playing, and then build your deck from that point on. That's where I would be, at least with the deck as a whole. Obviously, I'm not, winning tournaments and doing all these things with Dimir, so I'm not saying I have the correct idea, but I'd love to hear what you guys kind of think. What's the best build, or what are the Dimir players thinking? What are they doing? Always like to hear from you guys. But Dimir has kind of proven itself. We saw Dimir putting up a lot of numbers, not really closing out or getting that first place finish. Now they've gotten a couple first place finishes this weekend already. I think this is just going to be the premier mid-range deck moving forward, and what you're going to need to either learn how to build, learn how to play. And if you're going to play it, you definitely need to learn how to play the mirror match, because that's going to be everywhere in your RCQs and things of that nature. Moving on, then on to Sunday, we had the standard challenge. Once again, Dimir midrange putting up 7 copies, no surprise there. Golgari midrange, though, showing that it is still getting played, putting up 4 copies. Gruul Prowess putting up 4 copies. Jeskai Convoke putting up 3 copies. Domain putting up 3 copies. Selesnya Aggro Deck putting up 2 copies. Caretakers putting up 2 copies, and then a smattering of 1-ups. So not too surprising there. But once again, Dimir midrange is just showcasing that it's going to be 20+% of these top 32s is going to be there. You're going to have a game plan for it. Now, obviously, there's still things going on. People are still playing other decks. Dimir midrange is not, we're playing Dimir midrange or you're losing the tournament. We're not in that type of situation at all. Not to mention, we still have the aggro decks that still have decent matchups against the Dimir midrange deck. I know when I played way back when in the Columbus tournament that they had, or the Columbus Open essentially they had with Star City, aggro still felt really good against the Dimir midrange deck. It was not an open and set case for Dimir to take me out by any stretch of the imagination when I was playing aggro. It didn't feel like a bad matchup as a whole. That being said, they still have, a bunch of removal, a bunch of things. They have a game plan for you. They're not just going to roll over and die. But Dimir midrange does seem to be the premier midrange deck as we continue to go into this RCQ season. That being said, though, Gruul Prowess did end up winning. Nothing too shocking here, honestly. It looks like really they're just playing the mono red version with splashing green cards here, for Paul Patch Formation and Questing Druid. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can really splash these cards for essentially free. Thornspine Verge and Copperline Gorge don't really hurt you to have just in your deck. You're not going to take any damage from them. They already tap for red already. Especially the Thornspine or Verge taps for red by itself, and then if you have a mountain, it taps for green, so already good. But it's basically just the mono red list playing, and splashing for better sideboard cards. And I think that's where you want to be at if you're playing these red aggressive decks. This is what I like personally. I like playing the Gruul version, if you will, where you're splashing either for Questing Druid in the main or for the sideboard cards, like putting Questing Druid in the sideboard along with Paul Patch Formation. So it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward, but this is definitely one of the best decks. Screaming Nemesis proving why it is just, so expensive and does so much work against all these decks. Alright, and then we still had one more thing on Sunday. It was the Standard Spectacular. Once again, Dimir mid-range putting up 9 copies to almost no one's surprise, still representing 28% of this meta, or of this event. For the top 32, we had Jeskai Convoke with 6 copies, Gruul Prowess with 4 copies, Mono Red with 2, Dimir Control with 2, Azorius Tempo with 2, Golgari Midrange only 1 copy. This is kind of crazy, guys. Golgari has just seemed to drop off the face of the earth over a course of a week. And then, a bunch of the other 1-ups as well. So, again, no surprise, Dimir Midrange is showcasing that why it is the best midrange deck. Essentially is putting up, 30% of the field, or 30% of this top 32 was Dimir midrange. So, not too surprising. Jeskai Convoke, like I said, if Dimir is going to keep doing good, Jeskai Convoke is going to be your best way to fight that if you're not wanting to play, the midrange kind of game plan against them. They go wide, it makes it hard for Dimir to have an answer to it. Not too surprising going forward. That being said, though, it was a Boros deck that only had 1 copy in the top 32 put up the win for it. We saw this last weekend, actually, because we talked about Spellbook Vendor kind of being this like a random card I've never even heard of or didn't even know it existed in Standard until last weekend. So, not too surprising to see this deck do well again. It's still very well positioned. It gets to prey on the aggressive decks as well. With you have your Heartfire Hero and your Scavenger on turn 1 going into a turn 2 Shelter by Ghost can just be lights out against them. Playing the new Kellen as well. Playing the new Kellen as well, just as a 2-of. Kind of cool to see some play get into these red aggressive decks while still having the mouse package here with Emberheart Challenger, Hero, and Manifold Mouse. So nothing too much to say about this. It's a good aggressive deck that also has protection with the Shard Mage's Rescue, Sheltered by Ghost. Just good, honest, I'm gonna punch you in the face magic. So not too much to say about that one. That being said, if we take a combination of all the challenges, I kind of wanted to just showcase here that when we take a look at all the challenges, Dimir midrange made up almost 50% of the entire meta, which is crazy when we look at we're looking at the top 32, top 64 of these challenges and things. Dimir midrange was almost 50% of that meta. So 50% of the decks that were doing well were Dimir midrange. So not even, oh hey, we had 100 people fire for this event and we only count the top 32, or we only look at the top 32. So the people who were doing well were still 50% of it was Dimir midrange, which is crazy. And we look at Golgari midrange, which was, the premier, the other midrange deck. It was the one that was fighting neck and neck with Dimir. It's dropped down to 18%, 17% of the meta game. Kind of crazy. Now, I lumped all the red aggro decks together, so that's Mono Red, that's Gruul, that's Prowess. Gruul, Mono Red, and Boros. Not Prowess. They're all playing Prowess cards, obviously. But so with the whole Mono Red as a whole, or the whole red aggro decks as a whole, they're making up right around 32-33% of that meta. So just kind of to give you guys a better outlook of what you can expect to play against here, because obviously there's a bunch of different 1-ofs or random off-ofs, and usually I'll go through and kind of showcase it as a whole. But I thought it'd make a lot more sense to kind of break down and showcase, the Dimir midrange is basically 50% of the meta, which is wild to think of moving forward with. Going to your RCQs, going to play on Magic Online, things like that. You need to have a game plan for this Dimir midrange deck. It is essentially one of the biggest metas, or one of the biggest decks in the meta, if not the biggest deck in the meta. It's going to be there, it's going to take down, and it's doing well for a reason. It has a game plan, it's good, it's aggressive, it's under people, it gets to play counter spells or removal spells along with efficiently costed creatures. It's everything you want to do in Magic. So it's not too surprising that it's doing well. On top of that, we have the red aggressive decks making up, 33% of the meta. I'm just going to round that up. So still, aggro is alive and well. And this is not counting, the other aggro decks that are running around. We had, couple different random 1-ofs. We also had the Jeskai Convoke deck that's doing well. That wasn't counted in this red aggro. This is just, the low to the ground, the burn style strategies, essentially. Like I was saying, Boros, Gruul, Mono Red. That makes it up, 33% of the meta. So you gotta expect to have a game plan for those. They will just overrun you. They will just beat you. Whether or not you have a game plan for them. So you need to be able to have early interaction for that. You need to be able to stop them your mid-range from doing everything they want to do and going under your interaction and going under your bigger creatures essentially and just out-templing you out of the game. And then Golgari midrange is still 18% of the meta. That's not nothing to sneeze at as a whole. And it is still a deck that's fighting to try to take out Dimir midrange from its top place. You are going to see more people playing that as well, and it's still a very good deck. It's still reliant and resilient. So you need to have a game plan if you're trying to play in an RCQ, trying to play one of these challenges. These are kind of the 3 decks you need to be aware of. Now, obviously, I'm just going to say, Mono Red, Gruul, Boros are all the same deck, basically. Just, little different variants, but as a whole, they want to play a turn 1 mouse into a turn 2 Manifold and just start beating you down. That's like their dream hand every time. But that being said, you need to have a plan for the red aggressive decks. You need to have a plan for Dimir midrange, and you need to have a plan for Golgari midrange. It's going to be slightly bigger than what Dimir midrange does, and a little bit more resilient when it comes to stopping their early progression. So, just things to think about as you are moving forward with the RCQs, and what you're going to be playing, what you're going to be taking, what you expect to see moving forward. As always, guys, if you like what you're like what you're seeing, like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like to the video. Subscribe to the channel; it really helps me out. I'd love to hear what you guys are taking to your RCQs. I'd love to hear what you guys are seeing. And catch you next time.